Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for making time to come to our food poverty launch this morning. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Paul Cooper, and I've recently taken over from Anne as the chair of the trustees of Cirencester Food Bank. A little bit about me. I've lived in Cirencester for almost 25 years now, and I've been a trustee since 2018. Cast your mind back to what's happened since 2018. It's been quite an interesting time to be a trustee, but what a fantastic team we've got to lead us into our next year of Cirencester Food Bank. Couple of housekeeping notes. I'd like to thank Ingleside House for hosting today's events and for providing the refreshments. It's a fantastic venue for doing something like this, so thank you very much to them. We have a photographer today. They'll be going around and taking pictures. If you don't want to appear in the pictures, please let Paula know, and we'll be careful not to include you in any of the pictures that we use from today's event. And so, I think with no further ado, I'll hand over to Anton to take us through the launch of this year's food poverty report. Anton, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. A very warm welcome to you, although not as warm as yesterday. The aircon is on, so hopefully those in the room should have a more pleasant experience than last year when I happened to turn it off when I was plugging in all of the technology and we mainly melted. We are here today, obviously in person, but we are live streaming the event. So we're doing something a little bit different with our questions and answers at the end today. We're going to be using a utility called Slido, and you should see on the screen behind me a little QR code to get access to Slido. You can do that via the web or via the app. That just gives a little bit of equity so that those who are watching online can ask questions as well as those in the room. So do feel free to drop questions into Slido as we go today. Don't feel you need to wait until the end. And the technology fails us right at the beginning with the clicker. There we go, right. So it's great to have you all here today for the release of the Safe Cotswold Food Poverty Report. The report covers the period of April 2024 through to March 2025, a time where there was a lot of change, a lot of things happening, which seems to have been part of the recipe for the last, well, perhaps 10 or 12 years, really, within our area of work. We're so pleased that so many of you were able to come today, whether you're here in the room or watching online, because our work is so embedded in partnership, in collaboration, that we couldn't do what we are aiming to do, which is to end the need for people to use the food bank without all of your partnership in the room, whether you are working with us as a support organisation, as a donor or funder for food, whether you are a volunteer, all of us play our part, and we're going to be thinking about that today as we go through this presentation. Obviously, I can't cover everything that's in the report this morning. We're going to let you get away by 12, unless you want to stay for refreshments, when please do stick around afterwards. So we're going to be looking at the key points really as we go through the report, but I'd encourage you to get a copy. All of those who have registered for attendance will get an email copy through to you, but you'll also find it on our website and via our social medias. We've tried to keep it really accessible, which means short, so that it's hopefully very easy for you to look into and see some more of the detail that we're going to be talking about today. Obviously, we had a lot of people who wanted to attend today but couldn't make it. Our councillor MP Rob Savage wasn't able to, but we're going to be meeting with her next week. Obviously, there's a lot going on at the moment in Parliament that you're probably aware of, some of which we'll touch on today. But also Bishop Rachel Tariq, who's Bishop of Gloucester, really wanted to be with us. So she instead sent a message to all of us in the room today.
Hello, my name is Bishop Rachel. I'm the Bishop of Gloucester, and I'm so sorry I can't be with you today as you launch the South Cotswold. Hello, my name is Bishop Rachel. I'm the Bishop of Gloucester, and I'm so sorry I can't be with you today as you launch the South Cotswold Food Poverty Report. I simply want to say an immense thank you to Cirencester Food Bank and to your community partners for all that you do. It's really important to me as Bishop that we are speaking and acting for justice, for love and for hope. I would love to say that your work is not needed, but it is, and I'm grateful to every one of you who work to ensure that people have food, that they are treated as equal human beings and with dignity. So thank you for all your work and hope that the meeting today goes extremely well.
So thank you to Bishop Rachel for those kind words, which are given out to everybody in this room who is helping to end the need for hunger in our area. A lot has changed over the past year since we ran our last food report. It's hardly believable that 12 months and more has passed since we were last here. So we thought it'd be a good idea just to recap a little bit upon all of those changes, because they do make a difference, and so many little changes can add up to quite a significant impact. So over the last year, we've seen a number of things that we believe have impacted the number of people that need to access food support in our area. One of those is improved transport links and access to services. Since last year, I always think that sometimes people get a copy of our report even before we finish writing it, because just as I was finishing pen to paper last year about the issues of transport poverty in our area, the Robin was announced being released and giving more support into our area here. The Robin is a bookable bus service which allows access to people who are in rural areas. So we've seen a definite improvement in the amount of access given to people via public transport. And the Robin service slowly, month on month, has gained more traction, more bookings as people have become more aware of it. Equally, just as we released a report last year, we heard about the Can Do service, the Connect and Download service that was funded by Gloucester County Council and has provided support to help them get connected to other mental health services. And that came out just as we were releasing the report last year. And that has been running throughout the year and helps people who don't have access to mental health support to get connected into things like counselling and other support. The holiday activity and food programme continued to run, which was quite a surprise actually, because we thought that the funding was going to be removed last year, and it was great to see that funding continue. But alongside that, Cotswold District Council used some funding to start their strengthening community activities that now run during the school holidays. So those activities really have ramped up. The two alongside have given more access to support for working families during the school holidays. And last year, we also called for a greater understanding of food poverty in our area, specifically looking at food insecurity. Now, whilst we didn't go about that in the way we had suggested, Cotswold District Council have since purchased a licence for a low-income family tracker, which allows us to understand a more nuanced and granular information around both food poverty, energy poverty, water poverty in our area, which allows the direction of support to be much more effective. And one big change since last year is that the landscape of food provision has altered. In December last year, Cirencester Long Table opened in the marketplace, along with Gary Watkins' soup and food van, which is in the marketplace as well. Additionally, Cirencester Pantry was able to open up more spaces to their members. So a lot has changed around that area of food provision. And whilst a lot of those organisations are not looking at providing food aid, it still goes some way towards helping people who are in food insecurity. So let's think a little bit about the scale of food support in our community. So referrals to Cirencester Food Bank actually fell last year. They dropped overall by 9%, which resulted in 20% less parcels being given out. So that was in total 3,517 parcels were distributed, with a little under half, 1,580 of those being given out to children. That may come as a surprise to a lot of you, because actually last year still brought quite a few shocks to our community and wider within the food support landscape. The cost of living payments that were in place ceased in February of last year, and that was an extra amount that was going to many households. Some of us here will have got that also through our energy payments, but those on universal credit were getting some top-ups as a result of the cost of living crisis, and that finished in February last year. In addition, inflation did not abate within the essentials. That continued to climb. So those two things we would have expected probably to see a bit of an increase in food parcels that were being distributed. But there are a number of things that we think that changed which prevented this from happening. The first of those was actually the work that the food bank and other partner organisations are doing to ensure that financial support reaches people who are in emergency food need. So last year, through food bank support, through both its funded and direct schemes, we delivered over £835,000 worth of financial support directly to people, and that's through debt management, debt write-off, financial gains. So that's a significant figure that has helped people out of poverty. That's through both our partner work, which is funded through Citizens Advice, and through our own family engagement project work, where we're working directly with schools. Alongside that, the Household Support Fund remained in place, which obviously has been in date for quite a long time. This is a crisis support fund. It's been a little bit in date as to whether or not this would remain, but it has stayed in place, and we're coming into the next round now. The alignment of that alongside emergency support by Citizens Advice being able to give funding to people who have come for advice through Cotswold District Council's ability to give that to people who are struggling with maybe their housing has really made a difference, and we really think that that is one huge area that is meaning that our food bank has not seen big increases in food parcels. That direct cash first or cash style approach to making sure that is given out. And we can see that through other organisations as well. It's not just through the work of the food bank and through organisations like Citizens Advice, because even organisations like Siren's Pantry, which are working to reduce food waste and do help to also maximise people's incomes, managed to achieve £72,000 in benefits support for their members, and an additional £30,000 in benefit arrears support by giving benefits advice to some of their members. So we can see all of this financial support, when aligned with some form of food support or food provision, can make a huge difference to people who are in need. But as quick as we're providing that support, more people are falling into need. So 37% of people who used the food bank last year were new clients to the food bank. So we can see that whilst we are lifting people altogether out of that hardship, actually more people are finding that they're coming towards a struggle and really finding it quite difficult. One of the other reasons that we've talked a little bit about already is the increase in access to those alternative food models, where people might just be on the cusp of food insecurity, missing out on meals. There's opportunity now for them to go and access things like Siren Sister Long Table, the Food for Thought van, and other models that are available, which do help people from dropping into more severe hardship. But one thing that became obvious as we looked at the report is that hidden hardship and under-referring still play a big part in why people are not getting advice and support. So many people in our rural area are sort of not aware of the support that's available or not able to access it. Often stigma plays a huge part, which prevents people from asking for help. And that's not just for help from the food bank, that's from other organisations as well. They don't want family or friends to know about it, so they definitely don't want other organisations to know about the issues that they're facing. But we know that early advice and intervention can make a huge difference to those in our community. And then we've had some national changes which have made a big difference to people in hardship. One of those is the uprating of benefits. So last year we did see an increase in benefits. Working age benefits went up by about 6.7%, roughly, which obviously makes a difference. Unfortunately, a lot of that should have happened historically, so it's coming quite late. So it's not exactly giving people an uplift. It's balanced them a little bit more to where they should have been. So that was in last year's budget changes. The national living wage increased last year as well and gave an uplift of around £1,800 to working families. And actually 35% of people coming to use a food bank have some form of income. And that might be surprising to some because often it's thought that people on benefits are the main users of the food bank. And whilst there's a good proportion there who are serving on benefits, there's a lot who are coming in and needing support from the food bank who actually have some form of income. But one reason as well, we think, is stabilisation after quite a period of sharp increase. So obviously we've gone through over 10 years ago now a period of austerity, through into a period where we've had the pandemic, out of that into a period where we've had global conflict, which has caused cost of living crisis. So we've had a period where actually a lot of people are finding it quite difficult. But the FCA's Financial Lives survey from last year identified that the number of very vulnerable households had been quite stable since 2022. Trussell also saw a bit of a overall parcel decrease of about 9%. So we might be in a period where actually we're just stabilising a little bit on those elements. So why we're not seeing such an increase as we might expect this year. So we're going to think a little bit about who's most vulnerable in our community and at risk of hunger. Now, obviously, we always say anybody could be at risk of hunger in our community. It just takes one crisis to happen and suddenly you find yourself needing to rely upon food banks. And that is something that we see often. But there are certain people, certain groups within our community who are more vulnerable than others. And we want to share a story now from Sean. Sean's a single male in his early 50s, and he shared our story with us, which illustrates the sort of challenges and vulnerability that people are experiencing.
Sean is in his early 50s. After a no-fault eviction, a series of challenges followed, and he found himself homeless. With no suitable social housing available anywhere nearby, he was offered a place in the Cotswolds and had to move county. At the same time, a long-term health condition began to worsen, leaving him unable to work. The rising cost of living, combined with a low income, pushed Sean into debt. He turned to the food bank for support.
The amount of universal credit I received, along with the basic level of personal independence payment, just wasn't enough to live on, especially with high private rents. My world became small and my choices limited.
Sean had to sell his car to cover bills. Without it, he relied on limited bus services or paid higher prices at local shops. In early 2024, he reached his lowest point, sitting on a bench outside a community fridge, waiting for food so he could take his insulin. He wondered if life was still worth living. With help from the food bank and a citizens' advice worker funded through the project, Sean was able to review his benefits, increase his income, and access support for a mobility car. Slowly, he began to rebuild, finding a rhythm again and a little more hope. But even with the higher rate of the personal independence payment, the high cost of living in the Cotswolds means Sean is only just managing. High rental costs continue to make life especially difficult.
When you apply for social housing, they put you into a band based on how urgent your situation is. It's kind of like a queue, and I have been moved up to silver, but there are others who are seen as needing help more urgently. It's frustrating because it feels like I'm always waiting, but never quite close enough to be offered anything.
Recent announcements about changes to disability benefits have brought back anxiety and impacted his mental health.
Since the news, I haven't been sleeping. I'm scared I'll lose my car again. Scared I won't have enough to live on. I try to stay positive, but it's hard. They make decisions without speaking to the people it affects. Do they think someone my age wouldn't be working if they could?
I think quite a striking story that illustrates many of the challenges that people are facing that lead them into food poverty and hunger. So we're just going to pull out a few of the things in that story and some other groups that we're finding very vulnerable and needing to access the food bank. So Sean is just one of a number of single men who are needing to turn to the food bank for help. And we found it quite striking as we delved into the information and data we had this year that 72% of those who were living alone were male. And just to clarify that, we have in totality, we have about 30% of those who are referred to us and are the named person referred to us are men. About 70% are female. However, in that 70% of women who are referred, they're often the named person because they're the one that has stepped forward or been asked to step forward to get support. There will be men in those households too, but we don't know for certain what the household breakdown is. But we can clearly see for single occupancy households that men are very vulnerable. And we know from national statistics and reports that men often find it quite hard to ask for help. So the fact that they are stepping forward is a good sign to get support. Often, for those who are living alone, and not surprisingly, they are relying on benefits, and men are specifically more likely to be relying on benefits when they live alone. And obviously, for those who live alone, they are one of the more vulnerable groups because they don't have another income to rely upon. They also may not get access, although the expenses going out will be different, to some of the associated benefits that others will get, such as the child element of universal credit or housing benefit. So there are some things in that group that make them more vulnerable. But they're also likely to be suffering from health issues, which may be physical or mental health. So it's one group that really stood out to us this year and aligned with other conversations we had with other groups locally about the vulnerability of single men on their own. Another group that we've consistently found throughout the food bank's history that are vulnerable are those who are families, those with children who are aged 16 or over. 57% of our overall referrals this year were for families. It was a bit of a split. 28% of those were single parent families, 29% of them were couples with children in their household. So a bit of an even split within that. But I think striking again how being on your own as an adult, especially then trying to bring up children, is a real stress and challenge for people and leaving them without enough money for the essentials. School holidays were a real pressure point for families, with the added expense of having children at home and trying to make sure that there's support in place for childcare, enough food in their household. All of those sort of things add up for families, and trying to give their families a good experience during the holidays. Obviously, they can't expect to give the same experience to the family with more money in the holidays, but actually to be able to give their children some form of life experience where they do get to have those holidays, even within the UK, can be a real stressor. And we'll hear a little bit more about that in a moment. The two-child benefit cap often comes up when we're thinking about families and the impact of that. And nationally, we know that actually that is causing a great deal of challenges for families and is linked very tightly into the issues around child poverty within the UK. Our stats didn't really go into showing anything particular there, because I know that's obviously of interest to a lot of people. We found that actually, again, we were split pretty much half and half between referrals for families with 2 or less children and families with 3 or more. But that's likely that it's just down to our demographic. We may have just less families within the southern part of the Cotswold district who have larger numbers of children in the household. So it's not suggesting that families who have 3 or more are not being more severely impacted, and 2-child benefit cap is not having an impact. But from the point of view of referrals into the food bank, it's relatively evenly split. And I've touched on this already, that what's very interesting is that at least 35% of households referred into us have some form of income. And that actually picks up on other reports from other organisations, both the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and Trussell talk a lot about the working poor, those who are in low income or insecure employment, which leads them to rely upon food banks. We'll look at this a little bit later on, but sometimes we found that's because people are simply not aware that they are entitled to benefits. They may have some form of income, it might be a low income or it might be only part-time hours, but they're not aware that they are entitled to things like universal credit to top up their basic income and mean that they can afford the essentials that they need. So we've thought a little bit about the individual groups. We're going to move on now to think a little bit about what actually are some of the key drivers, what's happening to people that means that they need to use food banks. And we're going to hear from Sarah now. Sarah is a single mother. We've just been talking about families, and she has 2 children, and she's found it very difficult to break free from needing support from the food bank.
Sarah is heading into her mid-30s. She lives in social housing in the Cotswolds with her 2 daughters. She's previously worked in care but has limited formal qualifications. Her early life was marked by instability, and she became a mother at a young age. Her daughter's father was later imprisoned, but Sarah managed on her own. Sarah first used the food bank when her benefits were stolen by family members. She described the difficulty of asking for help as a parent, fearing involvement from social services.
You try and keep things to yourself. I got extra blankets for free from Facebook so I didn't have to put my heating on, and I cooked food on the hob or microwave as it's cheaper than putting the oven on. I've never had much money, so I don't know anything different, but I see people getting their shopping, and they put loads in their trolley and don't look at the price of stuff. I add my shopping up as I go, so I've got enough money to pay for it. I'd like to see them shop with a certain amount of money.
The food bank provided Sarah with practical support, including food, fuel vouchers, and second-hand clothing for herself and her children. She was provided with support and advice to manage her debts and move on to social tariffs for her utilities.
I can't think back to a time when the food bank hasn't helped me or my family. I want better, but I don't know if people will let me. I've never been on a holiday, but I like the seaside and want to take the kids one day. I want to work in the next year so I can be a normal person.
I think something that comes out in both of those videos is how much people actually want to contribute by getting employment. They're not looking to stay reliant upon their benefits and upon the food bank. And but just the challenges around that, whether it be health or whether it be dependents that you need to look after, and how that can be such a challenge. So we're going to be thinking now about some of those drivers, some of which we've heard of in the first video, some of which we've touched upon just then, that are causing people to need to get help, either in food aid or other crisis. And health, last year we raised as an issue, and it continues to be a huge driver for food bank use. And this is something that we're seeing nationally as well. Those who have a disability or long-term health are more likely to need to turn to food banks for support. And just under half of those who are using our food bank last year cited either a new or ongoing health issue. 75% of those we referred onto our citizens advice team, which we fund, they had support for PIP, personal independent payment, which is a benefit which is available to anyone who has a health issue, and they may qualify to get additional support towards their living costs. And we thought that was really quite interesting. 55% of those referred on had long-term health conditions, and 8% were disabled. So there was a real correlation, not only by those who were referred indirectly, but the amount of support for those who were in debt or were struggling with benefits, that health was a driving factor here for people. And it's something obviously that all of us, I'm sure, will be aware of the discussions in Parliament that took place yesterday, and will continue to go on around about disability benefit and the impacts that that might have on those who are vulnerable in our community. Energy and housing debt was another key driver. I've always said that energy, whether it be any utility, whether it be gas, electric, or even water, and food poverty, are pretty much not even the two sides of the same coin, they're the same side of a coin. If somebody is in energy debt, they're probably spending what they need to spend on energy on food. If people are in food poverty, it's probably that they're spending it on energy. It comes back to that phrase that we probably heard a lot last winter, which is choosing between eating and heating. And for some, they can't even make that choice. That choice is that they don't have enough for either of those two elements. So we always think about where somebody is in energy debt, maybe there is some food aid that could be provided, which would maximise their income so that they could start to pay off some of that energy debt. So there are different ways, but there's a lot of interconnection and correlation between energy debt and food debt. One of the other big areas of debt that people were facing was council tax arrears. In fact, debts related to housing, when you total them up, exceed even fuel debts. So once we look at council tax arrears, housing association rent arrears, and the water supply, those essential utilities arrears, actually people are really struggling in that area of housing. We heard from Sean in the first video about the challenges he faces with being in private rental, and the majority of his benefit income going on that, but no other affordable housing being available to them. So debt is really, and continues to be, a real driver for people needing to use the food bank. And also unexpected expenses and just general financial fragility. Overall, 54% of people cited the rising cost of essentials as being a driver for why they needed to use a food bank. If we go back to families, a staggering 95% of them suggested that the rising cost of dependence was a key trigger. These numbers, if you are a mathematician, do not add up to 100%, because you can have up to 4 reasons for referral to the food bank. So they can be multiple stressors which are causing issues for people as they come into our work. But things like dependence continue to be a challenge, and we know things like the cost of uniforms for schools, having to top up because of the fact that the allowance for free school meals doesn't quite give enough money to people, so having to top up the free school meal allowance with their own money, the cost of transport, travel, all of these different things really put stresses on people. So we've looked at who's potentially most vulnerable. We've looked at what might be driving them to need the food bank. But within our rural community, there are a number of things that are just systemic. They're outside of anyone's control that lead them to need to use food bank or other food aid or other crisis support. And we're going to be looking at those a little bit now. And one of the things that we find within this area is, especially in rural situations like ours, people are really struggling with what we might call the poverty premium. It's where people simply find that things are more expensive because they are on a low income. And a way you might think about this is, if you have sufficient income, you might pay for your car insurance upfront. You can afford to do that. But for someone on a low income, that is just not possible for them. They have to pay in instalments. And as a result of that, they're often paying a higher price. And the same is true of many other things. But in our rural area, that's even harder because we are subjected often to higher costs, higher heating costs for our buildings, higher transport costs. Our cost of fuel often is a few pence per litre more than just going up the road to Swindon or over to Gloucester and Cheltenham. All of these things add to that poverty premium for those who are really struggling on a low income. Housing, we've touched on quite a bit, and we're going to hear from Jill now, who really struggles with the cost of her housing. And in our area, this is something we see a lot of. We've talked already within those debt figures of people falling into debt because of housing. And the high cost of our housing locally means that that is a big driver. So let's hear from Jill.
Jill is a single parent with 5 children in education. She lives in a 4-bedroomed social housing property. Her local housing allowance is lower than the monthly rent for the property due to the 2-child benefit cap. As a result, Jill faces a regular underpayment of £148 per month. Discretionary housing payments can enable local councils to provide short-term financial support to help people who are struggling with housing costs. However, she was not able to obtain support because her youngest child was under 1-year-old and her eldest son on reduced timetable at a supported college placement. To avoid the risk of eviction, Jill needs to pay the difference. Jill has requested to downsize, suggesting her 2 younger children can share a room and she will share a room with her 2 daughters. This has been refused as the household would be overcrowded. She feels trapped, and the family are living in hardship and regularly needing food bank provision.
I think the thing that came out for me with that story was how trapped people can feel when they are stuck in a situation where they can't afford food, they can't afford the essentials, they can't afford to pay the bills in their house, and how they're slipping deeper and deeper into debt. And that's something, again, we're seeing nationally, and Citizens Advice nationally have looked at their red index, which shows how many households now are falling month to month more and more into arrears because they can't afford to pay back the things that they need to do. The report goes into a few more details on this, and I'll point you back to that. But there are some challenges, especially that households have around their council tax. Council tax is paid monthly, but if someone falls into arrears with their council tax, they need to pay the full amount up front, so the whole year, which for someone who's already missing payments can obviously be devastating. It can push them further and further into debt to do that. There is support out there. The video talks about the discretionary housing allowance, but obviously our local councils only have so much money to be able to contribute towards that, and we can't, we don't have a magic money tree locally, unfortunately. But it does also mean that some people are not able to access that because of eligibility, because of the nature of what's happening there. So housing really does play a big part, we're seeing, within people being trapped in poverty locally. Issues within our area are around the high cost of housing. Whilst we often have new developments which say they have affordable housing, often they're not quite genuinely affordable housing for those who are on a very low income. And that's proving to be a big challenge for people, especially if they are, in some cases, in smaller houses, because of the fact that they have more children. And that's, again, where we do see evidence of the 2-child benefit cap limit having a significant impact. One of the other systemic issues we see is transport poverty. We've talked about that, and I have talked about the Robin service, and it's great that work is being done to ensure that our rural community is more connected. But as good as the Robin is, there are still limitations to its service. It doesn't cross county or even inter-county boundaries. So whilst you could book the Robin from our area here in the South Cotswolds, it couldn't cross over, for instance, into Malmesbury, which people in Tetbury would need to maybe go to for lower cost food because of the fact that it just needs to drop you in and you have to connect to other public transport. That would mean that you've paid a £3 single fare for the Robin to get you as far as the boundary, then you have to pay another £3 single fare to get you into Malmesbury in some cases, depending upon the nature of the journey there. So there's real issues still around transport poverty, despite how far we've come in the past year. We talked about health, and that creates a real barrier for transport as well. The Robin service doesn't have a system where it can pick up people who have poor mobility, who are disabled. So they don't do doorstep pickup, which is something that some other similar transport systems do have in place. So there's a bit of an accessibility into that transport poverty that's causing people challenges as well. And one of the things that we've seen is a lack of capacity within our education, within our schools, to actually support families. This is a real challenge for schools. Their budgets just simply do not go far enough to be able to employ or retain family engagement workers, family support workers, pastoral workers, who can come alongside families who are struggling and provide them support and signposting to other organisations who can help. And we've seen, sadly, over the past year, a number of the family support workers within local partner schools who have either left due to low pay or due to ill health because of the stress of trying to provide that support for families. So we do know recently it was debated in Westminster that schools within Gloucestershire per pupil are less underfunded by about £1,000 per pupil compared to the highest funded schools within the UK. So we do have quite a significant shortfall because of the way that that funding is calculated. It's central government to get that out to areas. So we're seeing a big challenge there. But a lot of support comes from schools for families. Over almost 50% of referrals for families to the food bank come directly from schools. So schools are using that as an access point to get support, but the capacity just isn't there because of funding. So there's quite a few issues within that area. We're coming into the home stretch now, I'm sure you'll be pleased to know. So we thought, well, it's no good us standing here and saying, well, this is what we're seeing, this is what's happening, without putting forward some suggestions, some ideas for what possibly could be done. And this is where the partnership, the collaboration really comes in, because these are some ideas we've come up with through our conversations with other organisations that we've brought on board to chat through. But we don't have the solutions. And I know that people in this room, people watching online, people catching up later, will have better ideas than we have as to how we can address the issues that people are facing. Oh, I've still got time. Yes, I got 15 minutes. Well, this might be interesting. I have a big voice. Sean, I'll loop you much. Oh, we're back. There we go. We're all good. Don't worry. Everybody at home could hear us. Could have got the microphone there. We've been fine. So let's have a think about it's. So someone from central government's cutting me off. That's what's going on. No. I'm joking. So some of the things that we've thought about that actually we've seen working really well, either over the past year or in our neighbouring districts, that have provided so much movement on actually getting support to people. And the first of these is actually continued alignment of advice along with emergency aid. We've talked a little bit about how actually when we're providing advice, it uncovers issues that people haven't talked about, or when they're coming in to get emergency aid. I've got again. We might just lose that. I suspect my battery is a little. Tell you what. Oh, I'm not back. No. We'll ignore that, shall we, everybody? Yes, okay, right. So one of the things that we're really keen to look at is how we can make sure that if someone's in a crisis, how do they get access to financial advice and support alongside that? So people coming to the food bank, obviously going back 5 years, would have just been provided with a food parcel. Hopefully they would have had advice and support before they reach us, but it wasn't always guaranteed. the food bank, in trying to put our money where our mouth is, have decided that actually we want to be part of this solution. So we now have a dedicated team who work to ensure that we connect people with financial advice when they come into the food bank. And you've seen some of that in those sort of figures of the 835,000, but we're seeing that in other organisations as well. And I think it's really important that we continue to see alignment of funding to deliver that advice and support alongside crisis provision. The government has recently announced its successor to the Household Support Fund, which has allowed that. So the Household Support Fund has enabled organisations like Citizens Advice to provide food vouchers, energy vouchers and other financial support alongside its monetary advice. And the same for Cotswold District Council. And the government's new Crisis and Resilience Fund would really be encouraging that thought is given to how that can continue that aim to make sure that we are connecting that crisis support and that advice together. The next one, perhaps a dream that we have, but one that it's come out and is evident within the report, is the challenge of affordable housing locally. Now, we recognise within the Cotswold District Council's housing plan how difficult it is to look at genuinely affordable housing within our area. We have a lot of green space that we cannot. Thank you very much. Everybody else is like, oh no, he's loud again. So we have a lot of green space. We have difficulties with actually trying to just build enough housing out there, and then trying to make sure that the significant proportion of that is accessible and affordable. Also combined with the fact that actually with an aging demographic, those houses need to be accessible to people. It's a real challenge. We don't underestimate the challenge of trying to achieve this, but actually it's essential to ensuring that people have enough money to afford to buy food, to pay for their electric and gas going forward. We talked a little bit about this last year, but it's still really something that we think is really essential. Our rural area really has a challenge about having equitable provision of support across the whole of the southern part of the Cotswold district. Now, it's a huge area, it's over 210 square miles, so it's not surprising that that is difficult for organisations locally to be able to reach all parts of that area. But we can see in neighbouring districts such as Stroud District how they have moved forward with plans for support hubs, which actually have made a huge difference within their communities, where they bring together support not just of organisations but also the job centre and DWP support into those spaces, so that those who cannot reach the support, who are digitally isolated, those who can't get to us, we go to them. And we think that that really needs to be given more consideration about how together as partners we can be working in areas. And I know that through the low income family tracker that we've been looking at with Cotswold District Council, the west and the east of our area, sort of into Lechlade and Tetbury, are key areas that do not appear to be getting equitable support and have high levels of need, especially around energy debt in those spaces. We've talked about transport already and about how our transport has improved. It's great, but it's always a little bit on a knife edge. It's very easy to think that services are not being used because actually they're not set at the right time for people to use them, or they're not accessible, and therefore those services get cut. The Robin obviously has gone a long way towards resolving that, but still creates barriers with, as we've talked about it, dropping people at certain locations and not being able to continue them on their journey, and not being able to pick up those who are isolated directly from their homes, which is done in different areas. And we would ask for consideration as to whether or not there is opportunity within our transport system to think about how we can help those who are most vulnerable and connect with them so that they can access services and support that they need. One of the other challenges with transport is that actually it leads back into that premium poverty issue again, because with public transport, people cannot go and do a big weekly shop. They can't get it back on the bus. There's not space for them to fit it around their legs when they sit down. It's just practicality, which means that they have to go back and forth in order to get their shopping in smaller quantities. And whilst the single fare has been capped at £3, that's still beyond the reach of many of those on a low income. That's a single fare there and back again, remember, so that's a £6 round trip. If you're having to access multiple services, healthcare, come in to do your shopping, you need to do more trips, that adds up very quickly. And we wonder if there's a way maybe to be looking in the same way that the job centre have a 50% discount on bus fares for those who are accessing work. They have a card that can be given out. Is there a way for those who are most vulnerable and trying to get access to support to be given some way of getting further discounts? There is a way for people who have disabilities to get discounts on travel. And we've been talking with Science Attraction on the buses about all of these sort of things and the challenges that are faced. But it doesn't really extend to those who might have dependents. They have to get to school and when they're preschool and those sort of things. So that's a bit of a challenge for people. We've touched a little bit upon the issues around education funding already, but that really is having an impact, and either some form of funding that can put family support workers back at the heart of schools, or a way that we as organisations can be supporting them more within school settings and have a more direct and fast and warm referral link over from families into our services would be ideal, because families don't know often where to turn to for help when they're in crisis, and often therefore they have to turn to schools. And if a school has a pastoral worker, a family engagement worker, that's great, because we can work with them and alongside them, both as the food bank and with organisations. But where that funding isn't there, and where often those roles have been pulled back into being teaching assistants, it's still leaving a huge gap for people who need support. And the final is one that we've been looking at, obviously, and it's been news considerably over the past 24 hours, if not over the past few months, and will continue to be in the news as we go forward, is the issue around disability benefits. We know from our report, and we've shared, that local people have shared how uncertainty can have a massive impact upon their mental health when there are changes to benefits coming. And we feel that any reforms that are going to happen or are being considered to happen that impact people need to be developed in consultation with those people who are affected, those who are suffering from ill health, who are disabled, all of those, and also in consultation with the organisations that support them, and doing that with a clear focus on protecting the most vulnerable in our communities. So those are just some things. I'm sure there are many more that we've just talked about, some people, and there'll be many more. Food poverty can affect anyone. But today we've just tried to bring this information to you. This is not about food. This is about dignity and opportunity and fairness. And we believe strongly that together we can build a community where no one needs to use a food bank. So a huge thank you to everyone coming today. We are going to move into a time of questions and answers. If the Slido works, fingers crossed. It would have been easier if all of the other tech worked. I'd have more confidence in this, but let's see. So if you haven't already been able to log into Slido, if you want to, then you can scan the QR code there, tap in the code, whether you're in the room or whether you're online, and let's see if we get anything here. Okay, well, that's not looking promising, is it? So my backup plan is a phone. Let's see if this works. The backup plan is walk around with a microphone, and sorry to people at home, you get let's see if we can bring this up. Alternatively, no one's asked any questions. That could be the other thing. Oh, there are no questions asked yet. So either it's fallen apart massively, or has anyone asked a question on Slido? Excellent, wonderful, there we go. Well, that answers my question then in that case. So what we'll do, we've probably got a bit of time. If no one at home has asked a question, we probably can do a bit of a walk around the room actually. So I'm gonna, we only have one working mic, which to be honest hasn't been working that well, has it, to be honest, so far. So we have one working mic. So we're going to try and do a bit, because we've got people at home and they want to hear you, we're going to do a bit of a relay. So we're going to run the mic out to you, and then it will be run back again. Paul's going to help me with this, especially if you ask any tricky questions, and I'm going to pass over to Paul. So would anyone like to raise their hand if they've got a question? Thanks, Kate. Yeah, just say you're typing, Kate.
So with the changes, with the kind of migration from ESA to Universal Credit, working at Bromford, we have a lot of customers who are going through this process, and one of the main things we're finding is the that crossover, the poverty that it's putting people in it, and the uncertainty. So I've got one family who 1 month might get a bit of ESA, the next month they might get a bit of universal credit, and they just have no way of planning what money they're going to get in. So I guess my question is, what can we do to kind of help support these families better? Because actually that transition isn't working properly, and it's putting people in poverty and then having to access the food banks, but also it's putting them into other debts, so housing debts, and kind of not being able to. So I think whether we can kind of shake the process up or something, I don't know, but it's frustrating. I mean, we do a drop in at the job centre every Friday morning, and we're seeing more and more customers coming in and just saying, I don't know where I'm at. And even, the colleagues who work very well with us at the job centre don't know what's going on as well. So yeah, that's my kind of question.
Thank you, Kate. That's really, and it's really complex, isn't it? So it's probably beyond what I can answer. Definitely standing up here at the front, but it's something worth seeing as well. And there's a number of things that we pick up on the report actually around that, especially those who are going from legacy benefits, their GSA, their ASA, onto universal credit, may not have had their housing be aware that they need to pay their housing and rent directly. They can have it set up so that that's taken out of the universal credit, the rent, but often it might be missed, it's not done, and suddenly they think, oh, I've got more money than I expected, because they're not paying their rent, and then they get into rental arrears. We've had issues around universal credit as well, where some people should have protected status for families, where they shouldn't have the long delay before their first payment as they move to universal credit. So for those of you who are not aware, once you make that move to universal credit, you've got at least 30, maybe 40 days before your payment comes in after receiving weekly benefits payments. So it's a big jump trying to align people with what they would expect if they were in employment. If you've got children in the household, there should be some protection around that, and that's been missed in many cases. And then also those who have been on legacy benefits do then get affected and may not have been in the same way by the 2-child benefit cap. So there's all sorts of things going on in there, and I think some of the key things there is about us working together as partners about how can we soften the blow, at least in the initial stage of that transition over. Is there something that can be happening around other crisis support that might not have been used normally, because once it's in place they've got a little bit more support in place, energy vouchers, those sort of things in place. But it's a real tricky one, Kate, because actually there's not a lot in place to soften that blow to them as they make that migration across. So I think it's a good conversation for us to be having as partner organisations about what we can be doing as people are moving across. I think we are most of the way through the migration now onto universal credit. I think I could be wrong on that, but it's really having a big impact, and going forward I think we'll continue to. Despite the uplifts that we've seen within those universal credit payments. I do have a couple on screen now, so there you are. Yeah, excellent. It does work. There's a bit of tech works today. Brilliant. The first one, what is the request for everyone attending today? Oh, who are we dedicated? Who are we dedicated to ending food poverty in their own way? That's a great question, but I have to say it depends upon your context, really. So obviously, one of the things that we see, and we continue to believe at the food bank, is that not everybody is getting the help they need. That comes out both in the fact that people don't know how to access support, they can't access support. I'm reminded of a saying, which I'm going to sort of twist a little bit here. I think it's an African saying, it takes a village to raise a child. And it's that sort of thing I think about. For us to help people out of poverty, it takes us as a community to help people out of the challenges they're facing, whether that's as individuals in your community and being aware of those who are struggling, whether it's those organisations who are providing support, whether those who are providing funding for that support to take place, whether it's those who are volunteering to make it a reality. Each of us plays a key part within that work, and I think that's really important to us as a food bank. I think it's really difficult because we've talked about stigma, and people, especially within our small rural villages, don't want to admit that they need help. It's really embarrassing. So to tell their neighbour they need help can be tricky. But by trying to normalise some of the conversation, we've talked about men on their own in houses being at risk. how do we normalise the conversation around talking about money and debt, as we do with mental health, in those groups where we just have men there, our men's sheds? How do we get into that space, a place of normalisation where we can ask about or just talk about debt, so that people are not afraid to open up about it and to get the help they need? So I think all of us in our community have ways and ins and different relationships with people that can help us to encourage them to ask for their help and get what they're entitled to, the benefits they're entitled to, the support they're entitled to. And I think that's probably our, along with the way of saying that's probably a core ask that we can all take away, no matter who we are, whether we're working for an organisation, whether an individual, and what our background is. Is there a requirement to pay a year's council tax if you fail to in arrears for a council decision or a national rule? In other words, could CDC change the rules? I think somebody might be able to fill me in on this one, but I think it's decided at a national level currently, but I think there is some local agreement as to how that goes forward. I don't know if there's anyone in the room from Sharon. I'm going to come to you with the microphone, please. I would give it to Paul, but I could do is stretch my legs.
So with my experience in both Swindon and CDC is they would like it all paid at once. It's not a debt that goes away. There are best thing is it is kind of a national rule, and what we see happening more and more now is unpaid council tax is very quickly handed to third-party bailiffs, who are really quite scary people. And when you phone them, they'll say all sorts of things like, no, it's gone too far, you've got to pay it straight away, otherwise we're coming round and taking your TV and your kid's bed and the pet rabbit and all the rest of it. So that scares people an awful lot. So it takes time and persistence to keep saying, we're on benefits, we don't have that money, we can't do it. Sometimes the unpaid arrears is because you've got a working family and the council tax support varies each month, depend on earnings. People get in a muddle with that, may not set the direct debit up, but even when you give all of those reasons, they still want it there and then, and you continue to get those threats. But you can pay over a period of time. If it's still with the local authority, they are quite good at setting up a monthly payment, but would want it by direct debit over a shorter period of time, so 10 months rather than 12 months or 8 months or something. If it's with the bailiffs, quite often you've got a fight on your hands. But if there's no other way and you've done your income and expenditure forms, which proves you can't pay it all at once, they will let you have a monthly repayment plan. But they continue to send texts, emails, letters to say a bailiff is coming to your door, to kind of want people to pay it sooner rather than payment plans.
Move across to Mary over here.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm from the pantry and I'm a benefits specialist, and I'm often in discussions with the district council, and I just want to say they have a fund available for people who have got exceptional circumstances and got into financial debt with their council tax and haven't paid it. It was underused last year. I don't know what it's doing this year. And it's often people don't know about how to go about it. I would say the best piece of advice is talk to the council. I have really had nothing but extraordinarily helpful members of staff and the debt section. As long as you're talking to them, there will be a way out. And it is hard. The other thing I would say is that people do get put off, and I've raised this point every year, by filling in the forms online to get council tax reduction, housing benefit and discretionary housing payment. I don't think the council is yet doing enough to understand that people on their phones have a real barrier to doing that, and it's not whether you're are not computer literate, it's just very difficult to do.
Another question down here.
Thank you, Mary, and definitely advocate for that, talking to those that you're working with. I think that's so important, again, as part of that partnership. Who was I going to? Ellie.
I am one of the Cirencester Food Bank advisors. So just to say, we do obviously deal a lot with council tax arrears. The council are really, really supportive with helping people manage their arrears. But obviously they need to be engaged in seeking debt and financial support. But I have to say they are really supportive. If we ask for holds, if we ask for support from them, they're immediate, more or less, in coming back to us. So thank you if anyone is from the council team today.
Excellent, yes. And we'd again reiterate that our work with Cotswold District Council has been absolutely excellent when we've been working alongside them, so that's been great. I'm just gonna, I think I can scroll. No, I can't scroll here. Losing the one to the bottom, how do I get back? I think I saw one at the bottom which was talking about where are we now with, we've talked a lot about obviously over the past year, where are we looking at the moment with our figures for the food bank? Are they going up? Are they going down? At the moment, we're in a little bit of a period normally before the storm when we hit the school holidays, and the numbers are lower over the last quarter, but that is in proportion to the amount of financial support we're given. So I talked about a lot of our work now is actually that connection to our funded advice routes, and that's where obviously for us as a food bank we're working with partners to enable us to fund that sort of work. I know if you talk to Ellie and Katie, our wonderful, or Ricky, our wonderful CA funded advisors, they're at capacity at the moment with the amount of people we're getting into them who are getting funding advice, but on the other end of that they're not needing to use the food bank. So the numbers are doing what we would hope. They're working towards exactly our vision that they'll go hungry. The number of food parcels are coming down, the number of advice and support and successful benefits and sort of support claims and other financial advice is going up within the organisation. Whether that will continue, obviously the challenge for us is that you only need to change one cog out there. One simple change can make a huge difference, and which is why we are watching with interest the decision of the government as to what's going to happen with the disability payments, because that's been such a big area of support over the past year for those who are using our service. We might not get through all of these questions, so what I'll do is we are going to try and respond to any questions that come up on here. We will try and respond to them in a little series after the event, but I'm conscious of the fact that some people do need to get away, so we'll catch a couple of these. One at the top at the moment, alongside citizens advice, which other organisations would you like to see around the table when providing advice and support to clients? Oh, all of them. There you go, that's nice and easy. I think what we're seeing obviously is that when you are looking at a client's journey for support, they start with a crisis. And normally what's happened is they've tumbled down that sort of ladder or fallen off the tightrope, really, landed up right at the bottom. So those organisations that are dealing with the crisis support are really important to have around that table. And obviously the food bank, that's where we start from. But it's also where citizens advice start from, because of the fact that they're picking up those things with debt and the like. But we've got great partnerships with organisations like Clean Slate, who are here today, and it's lovely that they could join us, who are working on the other sort of, as people move up that ladder, on budgeting, on employment support and those sort of areas as well. I've talked about the fact that energy goes hand in hand with food. So those that are providing energy support, which obviously Citizen Advice and Clean Slate do, but our partners at Warm and Well are really great to have there. But actually, this is something that anybody who's interested in coming and joining us around the table, we need to be working together to achieve that. So there's no one who shouldn't be sitting at that table to look at how we can end the need for food banks and how people can avoid going hungry. Should we take, is there anybody got one in the room? I'll take one more in the room and then one more on the thing. Paul, would you be my runner? Thank you.
Two others in the shorts that you showed, the shots that you showed, and you haven't mentioned a child support agency at all. Do you work in conjunction with them?
Thank you. It's a really good question. And we're not, by omission, it's not that we're not connected to them. I think the thing for the food bank is, and with our family engagement work, is we're normally working with the adult in the household. So the person who's referred to us is obviously the adult. We don't normally have children referred to us, and the support we give normally is to the adults in the household to help them. But we are obviously working with children's support agencies and have really good relationships with Family First, with our echoes, with our support workers and social workers within the area, within others. So Family Action obviously started last year, and we've been working alongside them, which has been a bit of a slower sort of start up there. But we're very much sort of working alongside those, especially where there's support needed for families to support their children. Because as part of the early advice and support, that comes actually for when we're starting is with young people and children as well, that actually they've got that support in place, which helps avoid things like adverse childhood experiences, which can lead them into trauma, which lead them into situations where they can't get support later on down the line. So that sort of answer. So you're talking, so are the child maintenance, yeah. So the question that came from back those didn't hear it, are those single mothers getting support from those who have child maintenance? In some cases, yes, in some cases, no. Sharon, as our family engagement worker, has done a lot of work with families where they haven't been getting that support and making sure that is in place and supporting. Whilst Sharon is not a family support worker, she's just there to sort of to walk alongside people. She has helped them to make sure that they connect with our citizens advice teams and the legal advice they need there to make sure that they can pursue those maintenance claims where they're needed. So yes, so where we are aware of it, we work with our partners to ensure they're connected into it. I'm just going to take one more from here. I'll take the bottom one. Why don't we do that one? Discussion about council tax shows good quality advice is needed at various points. How can we help advocate for a well-funded advice service for all? I think this comes back a little bit, I suppose, into some of the government funding that comes out and is divested into our local areas as well, about how we make sure that that is allocated out to make sure that the advice and support is there. I think one of the things that we were thinking about with something that could happen, for instance, is how actually can we just bring more of that advice forefront? So we talked about the fact that people who have some form of employment do not know they're entitled to benefits. So what about a scheme where actually our employers made sure that as they took on new staff, they provided them with information to check that they had all of the benefits that they needed access to. We've had people who are working zero contracts or small hours who just don't know that they're eligible. If our employers were able to partner up with us as a community and provide them with something, a link to a benefits checker, a link to just some paperwork or to the support agencies that can help them to just ensure the impact of that might mean that those who are in employment actually have sufficient income, they don't take time off work, they're not ill, and actually improves their employment engagement. So I think there's ways here that actually we could go about it, not necessarily from a funding point of view, but from a partnership point of view. But from funding, it's about how we can. It's a really difficult situation. Everybody is after more funding at the moment, and we have a big black hole within central government and then coming back down. So it's about, again, I think getting around the table, using the data that we've got available to ourselves through things like LIFT, Local Family Tracker, through things like the Food Bank, through the other organisations here, to really look at how we target that support and therefore funding gets to the right places. I think that's probably one of the key things is making sure that we're not, we know exactly where that funding needs to go and making the best use of the funding we have. And obviously, as we move forward, hopefully looking at how we can get more funding in from central government to support those who are most vulnerable in the advice and support that goes into that. I will probably have to draw a line there, but we will come back. If you've asked a question we haven't got a chance to answer, especially on Slido, we'll be putting out a little series to come back and answer some of those a little bit more over the coming weeks. But I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody for joining us today. It's been great to have you here. As we always say, this report is not, it doesn't give all of the answers, it doesn't give all the solutions. It's one part of the jigsaw puzzle that you will all have other parts to. So we're really, really keen to ensure that we can connect with you going forward beyond this report to talk about how we can be working more effectively and partnering more effectively together to help those who are most vulnerable in our community. if you're staying in the room, do please stay for tea and coffee. It's a great opportunity to catch up. If you're an organisation that brought some resources with you, there is a table towards the back right-hand side where you can pop those resources down so that you can make sure that others can access them. And if you want to show support for ending the need for food poverty in our area, Taylor's standing at the back with a lovely little Polaroid picture frame. If you want to take a snap and retweet about yours that you commit to support to actually work with us to end the need for hunger in our community, because together we all play a part in achieving this. So please do catch that there. Paul, would you like to finish up?
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to thank Anton and the team for all of the work that they've done in pulling the report together. Hopefully you've heard the energy and the passion of the work that the team do. And Anton has been living and breathing this report for the last 2 months. So I'm sure he is very relieved now that he's got through the presentation and the report is launched. So if you could just join me in thanking Anton and the team.